Hey guys, FaZe here, back with another Whispers of the Old Gods review video. I'm sure you guys know the format by now, but we're going to say it anyway. The way we do things around here is we look at a card, make some notable observations about it, and then try to assess whether the card is playable / viable in Standard, Wild, and in the Arena. And yeah, we have a lot of cards to cover. I will try to keep this video brief. I know I said that last time and the video totaled around an hour, but I will do my very, very best for you guys today. So let's not waste any more time and get right into the cards. First card we have for today is the Addeled Grizzly, 3-mana 2/2 Druid Rare Beast. After you summon a minion, give it +1/+1. I'm sure it's probably apparent to most of you that this card is not that good. It is playable though with cards like Haunted Creeper, just because it's good if you can get value out of it instantly. It's not good just as like a drop, right? So it's either good in the late game when you can like combo some stuff with it, or it's good whenever you have something like a Haunted Creeper on the board, because you play this on 3, trade the Haunted Creeper on 2, and then you get like 2 2/2s instead of 2 1/1s. So I don't think there's enough good death rattles that are still going to be in the game past a post standard rotation. Haunted Creeper's going away. Yes, you have Harvest Golem, but I still think this is more or less a wild card, as in a card that will be somewhat playable in wild. It looks like it could be comboable with stuff like Dark Whispers, but it's, or like Whispers of the Old Gods, but it's like a 10-mana combo that only floods the board. So yeah, it's you don't want to do that most of the time. So for that reason, it's a pretty bad card in constructed. In general, in wild, it's a lot better. In wild, it's a lot better. Especially with things like, you know, there used to be actually a druid that ran eggs and creepers and soul of the forest, so this could make the cut there. But in other places, this does not have enough support cards to see play. And in the arena, it has the same problem. You can't build your deck the way you want it to in arena, so this card is unplayable. Next card we have is a Light in the Darkness, 2-mana Paladin common spell. Discover a minion, give it +1/+1. So you can compare this to Raven Idol, but you gain 1 more mana, lose the flexibility that you could discover a spell, but you know, in spite of that, you gain +1/+1. So is that worth it? I would say not. I would say it's not worth it, just because in Hearthstone, because it's a very win more game, X amount of tempo now is worth more than X +1 tempo later. So in that, when you think about it like that, it's not even good, because +1/+1 is about it's a little bit less than what you would expect to get for 1 mana. So when you look at it like that, it's not really that good. The 2 mana is just what kills this this card. It's just way too much of a tempo loss, and Paladin is shaping up to be one of the more aggressive decks, even in the standard format, with cards like Steward of Darkshire and Blessing of Kings always being in the core set. So yeah, it's not looking to be a very good card, just because it also doesn't fit what the Paladin is trying to do. And in arena, it's a bit mediocre. Raven Idol is good in arena, but it's like super flexible. In arena, what you want to do as Paladin is you want to tempo out heavily on the board, just so that when you can hit when you hit turn 4, you can smack down the Blessing of Kings, and on turn 3 the Seal of Champions, I think it's called. Yeah. So it doesn't really fit with your game plan in Arena as well. So I don't think it's a very playable card overall. Next one we have is the Aberrant Berserker. This guy is, I'm just gonna outright say it's not that good. It looks like it should be okay, but it's really not. Just because if you're playing it versus an aggressive deck, which is where you want to, which is versus what you want to play it. Because the game plan of this card is you kill something with 3 health, and then you kill something with 5 health. Correct? That's what you're trying to do with this card. The thing is, that kind of deck usually doesn't exist outside of Arena, because if you're playing against an aggressive deck with a lot of small dudes, you kill something, then it's a 5x, let's say a 5-3, for example, in like a good case, but then the 5 attack doesn't matter, right? So it might as well be a 3-5, because aggressive decks have, you know, a lot of small minions, so the 5 attack doesn't matter. On the flip side, when you're playing against a control deck, they generally, or a mid-range deck, their minions generally tend to have a lot beefier stats. You can look at something like Spider Tank, for example. It's a bad example, but hear me out. A lot of 4 and more health minions are being introduced into the game. We still have Imp Gang Boss. As an example, we're getting the Carrion Grub for Hunter, which is a very good card. We're getting the Pirate Girl for Warrior, which buffs your weapon. So it's really not that good against 3 mana cards with 4 or more health. We're getting a 3 mana 3/5, which is kind of like a rogue card. I talked about it, the Silithid Swarmer, I believe it was. So those against those mid-range decks, this guy just trades like a 1-for-1, and that's not really what you want to do with this guy. So it's pretty much only an Arena card. In Arena, it's pretty much okay. Very little things kill this, actually. On turn 4, the thing that comes to mind is something like Evil Heckler, right? 5/4s are somewhat common in the Arena, but it's nothing that you should be too concerned about. Most often than not, you are going to get your 2-for-1 trade with this guy in Arena. So, okay card there. Next card we have is the Gam Rager. Yeah. Just one thing to say about this card. Nice meme, Ben Brode. Obviously, it's a troll card. It's the Magma Rager spelled backwards with reverse stats. I don't need to tell you guys that a 3 mana 1/5 is really bad. Kind of like Mogushan Warden on 4 is very bad. And it even has Taunt. Yeah, it has 2 more stats than the Magma Rager, I'm gonna call it. And it even has Taunt, and it's still horrible. So, not gonna see play anywhere. Next card we have is Anomalus, and it pains me to say it, okay? It's an 8 mana 8/6 legendary mage minion. Death Rattle, deal 8 damage to all minions. And again, it pains me to say this, because this is such a cool card. But it's pretty bad, unfortunately. It has what I would call the Rodin effect, in the sense that it's really hard to kill off, right? When you play this expensive minion, it doesn't have taunt, so you have to be like, kind of with Ronin, you kind of have to be ahead on the board. And even then, it's not that good, just because it doesn't die, usually. And your opponent can often set it up so that there's nothing for you to trade it into, and you kind of want to trade it into something, because if you're putting something like Ronin or Anomalus in your deck, you have kind of like a specific plan for the card. So it doesn't really work just because the high amount of health that Anomalus has. The second problem, which actually tips the card to be even worse than Ronin, is the fact that Ronin is good when you're ahead on board, just because you can start smacking your opponent in the face and force them to trade into Ronin or remove it somehow. Anomalus is not even playable then, because if you're playing Anomalus when you're ahead on the board, your opponent is just going to fireball Anomalus and you're just going to lose your board. The way you want to play Anomalus is when you're behind on the board, maybe something like a Frost Nova, but that doesn't even work because Anomalus is 8 mana. And even if you get the Emperor tick, it's still not good because, again, Anomalus has very high health, and it just doesn't work, guys. Trust me on this. It's a pretty bad card. Probably not going to see it play in Constructed. In Arena, sometimes you're going to see this, obviously. And you can probably get like a 2-for-1 trade with this guy because at 8 mana, if you're not like horribly behind on board, you can hit your opponent in the face and force him to trade into it. Or if there's like a lot of if there's like a big minion battle going on, you can trade 2-for-1 with this because, you know, it'll nuke your opponent's other minions. But even then, it's a little bit sketchy. So the next card we have is Bilefin Tidehunter. It's a 2-mana 2/1, the corrupted version of Tidehunter, I believe. Yes, Tidehunter, exactly. Except the 1/1 Murloc Scout is now an ooze, and it has Taunt. It's not good, first of all, let me just say that. The 1/1 Taunt is fairly insignificant. And also, we are getting a lot of whirlwind effects in the game. See the new card Ravaging Ghoul, or the 3-mana Mage card that has an Arcane Explosion staple to it. The 3-mana 2/2. I'm blanking the name exactly, but you guys know what card I'm talking about, which card I'm talking about. So just because of that, I don't think this is going to see too much play. Almost anywhere. It's going to see play in Arena, though. In Arena, for all intents and purposes, it is a Murloc Tidehunter. And Murloc Tidehunter is kind of an okay card in Arena. It's an okay 2-drop. And the fact that it has Taunt is actually relevant. It actually makes it better in most cases than a Tidehunter. So definitely a playable card in Arena. Not like a super top tier pick, not even like just a top tier pick, but it's an okay 2-drop. Okay, and next card we have is the Bog Creeper. Now this is a card I've been going back and forth on. And I kind of ended up in the I don't like it very much camp. Yes, it's a big taunt. Yes, we need big taunts with the Sludge Belcher rotating out. But the good thing about Belcher is that it's 5 mana. And 5 mana is really the break point for a mid-game card, because you can play 2 of them on turn 10. Bog Creeper is very much a late-game card. And at that point, like, every kind of removal is good. Like, your Polymorphs are good, your Assassinates are good even. Assassinate's not even like that much a run card, just because it's hard to find a minion that you want to assassinate and gain tempo off of that, in Constructed anyway. So it's weak to hard removal, a lot more than Belcher is, because it doesn't have a second body. It's a lot more mana, so you can't really do much else on the turn that you play it. And it also gets targeted by the Black Knight as well, which is a big deal, because if there's ever a metagame where Bog Creepers are taking over, Bog Creeper decks are taking over the game, you just put Black Knight into your deck and, you know, win every single game versus Bog Creeper. So yeah, it's definitely not a terrible card. It's just a little bit too clunky to play in Constructed is the verdict on this. And in the Arena, it's pretty good. It's actually very good. It's still weak to removal, so if you have the removal for it, like, you don't care that much. But it's a big minion that taunts, and taunt is important to a lot of classes in Arena, kind of like Rogue and Warlock. Like, those are the classes that come off the top of my head. But yes, it's a very playable card in Arena. You're going to get a 2-for-1. The stat distribution is also very good. I forgot to mention that, but it is very good. So it's a very good card in Arena. It's just too clunky for Constructed. Standard, and definitely not Wild. Next card we have is the Corrupted Seer, a 6-mana 2/3 Murloc. So, the problem with this card is, pardon me, I have not read the whole card. 6-mana 2/3 Murloc rare minion. Battle cry, deal 2 damage to all non-Murloc minions. Now, the problem with this card is it doesn't go with what Murlocs are trying to do. Murlocs are trying to, get slightly ahead early, and then play something like War Leader on turn whatever, and then buff your stuff, or like the Cold Light Seer, and well, buff your Murlocs and win the game. But like this card just doesn't. It's not aggressive enough for Murloc decks, is what I'm trying to say. It's not. It just doesn't go with the Murloc gameplay and all that well. So let's look at it as a standalone card. It's a 6-mana 2/3, which kind of has like a Demon Wrath attached to it, because the effect is basically a Demon Wrath, but for Murlocs, right? So how good is that? I mean, it's pretty good. But at the same time, on turn 6, how many 2 health minions are there on the board still left? Like, probably not that many, unless you're versing like a super flood the board deck. It is neutral AoE, so it's pretty strong in that case, in that sense. But just because you cannot play this on turn 4 like you can a Consecration, it really hurts this card a lot, just because on turn 6 this kind of AoE is just so much less relevant, I would say. So for that reason, it's probably not going to see play in Constructed, but in Arena it's a pretty good card. It's a neutral board clear, and board clears are very, very like decent in Arena. It's nowhere near the power of a Consecration or a Demon Wrath, don't get me wrong, but it's still like very good, because it's a card that you wouldn't expect. For example, a Paladin. Well, okay, Paladin's a bad example, they have Consecration, but you wouldn't expect a class like Hunter to have a 2 damage AoE across the board. Yes, they have Power Shot, but Power Shot hits only 3 minions. You guys are getting my point. It fills a hole in some classes, right? Every class has some AoE, even Druid has like Starfall, but this is a card that is going to surprise you most of the time. So it's really hard to play. You're never really going to play around it, I believe. So it's going to, surprise you more often than not. So for that reason, it's a pretty good card in Arena. Definitely not great, but it's very, very good. Next card we have is the Cult Sorcerer, a 2-mana 3/2 spell damage +1. After you cast a spell, give your Cthulhu +1/+1 wherever it is. So it's a pretty busted card, mainly because it's a minion that you don't pay any stats for the spell damage, right? On Suits Pure, you're paying 1 life for the spell damage. On Jungle Moonkin, you're paying again 1 life for the spell damage, and both players have it. So the fact that it's on Dalaran Mage, don't get me started on that. Ancient Mage, Frigid Snowbolt, on every card except stuff like Thalnos. On Thalnos, you're even paying 1 stat for it, but the thing about Thalnos is that it's very easy to combo with, so that pays off a little bit better. With stuff like Azure Drake, you're not paying. So for every card that you see played that is in Constructed, that has spell damage, you're not really paying anything for it. And this, follows that effect pretty well. So it's actually pretty good, even in just Tempo Mage. For example, you can stick this in your Tempo Mage deck in Wild, for example, if you need spell damage for some reason, if that's the way you want to go with your deck building. So it's very playable even without Cthulhu. And Cthulhu Mage is actually, you know, forming up to be this tempo-y kind of mage with a Flame Waker and the Ice Waker, whatever his name was, the 4-mana 2/3 that freezes minion, kind of like Flame Waker, a 2/4, pardon me. So it's kind of okay, but I don't think Cthulhu Mage is going to be a thing, just because it's Mage is not really getting any cards that benefit off of Cthulhu having, like, any Cthulhu conditionals. Like, there's no Mage card that says if Cthulhu has X amount of stats, do something, right? And those are mainly the reason that you want to play Cthulhu. Cthulhu on his own is pretty good, but it's him and those cards that push him into a viable deck archetype for some classes. But that's not so much in Mage. So I think this is gonna... The fact that it buffs Cthulhu is mostly irrelevant. So it's kind of gonna be just there for the spell damage. And even for that, it's pretty good. 2 mana 2, a 3/2 spell damage is a very aggressive card. You can build a very aggressive mage deck with this, and you're gonna be happy about it. Definitely gonna see play in constructed in both formats, I believe. And in the arena, this is a very good card because it's 2 mana 3/2 that has spell damage. Not really much more to say about that. It's basically a 2-drop with upside, so that's very good. Next card we have is the Cyclopian Horror, a 4-mana 3/3 epic minion. Taunt Battlecry, gain a +1 health for each enemy minion. So the closest thing to this guy is actually Ascension. Ascension is kind of like the baseline we can look towards, like, to compare the Cyclopian Horror to. It's okay in Wild. Let me just say that. Just because in Wild, Muster for Battle exists, and Implosion exists, and Haunted Creeper exists, and, you know, Imp Gang Boss is still in Standard, but you get my point. There's a lot of tokens that exist in Wild. So, in Wild, it's actually reliable to play this guy and have it be Ascension, right? And you're sometimes going to play this guy, and it's going to be actually a 3/6 on 4, which is actually very, very strong. It basically becomes a water elemental body with taunt. That's ridiculous against an aggressive deck. So for that reason, in Wild, I think it's very good. Just because, well, yeah, in Wild, there's like a lot of tokens. We're getting some tokens in Standard as well. As Death Rattle specifically, and I'll go over them probably in the last part of the review, but not where near enough to warrant the Cyclopian Horror seeing that much play. It's more it's basically +1/+1 in not +1/+1 but +1 health in Wild than it would be in Standard. In Standard, you would expect to see like between 1 and 2 minions on average on the board by turn 4, and in Wild you're gonna see between 2 and 3 minions, whereas in Standard, again, you're going to see between 1 and 2. So looking at it like that, it's pretty good in Wild, not so much in Standard, and in the arena it's kind of bad. Sometimes it's going to be Ascension, but it's going to be Ascension just, you know, sometimes. So it's worse than Ascension, but not by much. Right? It's significantly worse than Ascension, but it's not like a bad card. So it's definitely playable in Arena, considering the fact that there are a lot of horrible epics out there. Next card we have is the Darkshire Councilman, 3 mana 1/5 Warlock common minion. After you summon a minion, gain +1 attack. So this is kind of another card that would have been insane in Wild, but in Standard not so much. Just because you need a bit more to make this guy viable. You want to play this guy and actually make him work on the same turn for the most part. It has 5 health, but the 1 attack makes it so easy to trade into without losing your guys that it's really not, like, you really don't want to play this as just a 1/5. So you kind of want to at least get one thing off of. So the thing that you would want to play in this kind of Darkshire Councilman deck is Imp Gang Boss. And the Possessed Villager is the card's name, I believe. It's a 1 mana 1/1 Warlock common that when it dies spawns a 1/1. So with those two, this card is okay. I just don't think that's enough to, for it to see like an insane amount of play. Like, it's just not good enough with just those two. If you know, you had your Haunted Creeper with this, and you had your Implosion with this card would be ridiculous. You do have the new Warlock card, which I will talk about in the next episode. That is the Forbidden, well, whatever it is, the Forbidden Warlock card. That is a 0 mana card and summon that many tentacles, right? However much mana you spent. But the thing that we're coming back to the thing that I said, that it's really, you don't want to play this as just a 1/5 on 3. It's kind of like like the Magma Rager that we looked over earlier, right? It's really weak. Like, it doesn't die right away, but it's really, really weak. So you want this to be at least a pardon me. Wow. You want this to be at least a 2/5, and that's really not reliable enough in a standard. So for that reason, I don't think this is gonna be good enough. It just barely misses the mark to be constructed worthy in standard specifically. In wild, it's a very good card. In wild, this is top tier, but in standard, yeah, not so much. And in the arena, again, if you get like a lot of creepers, a lot of implosions, you get the new Forbidden card in arena. This guy's pretty good. Otherwise, not so much. And okay. Next card we have is the Darkshire Librarian. It's a 2 mana 3/2 Warlock rare minion. Battlecry, discard a random card, Death Rattle, draw a card. So it's very interesting. It's obviously meant to be played in something like a discard Warlock with Fist of Jaraxxus and the if I can find it, the Tiny Knight of Evil. But the problem with that is those two cards are not enough on their own to spawn a deck archetype. They're just not enough. You need either one more overpowered discard card or one more, like a card that does something whenever you discard a card, kind of like Tiny Knight of Evil, but you know, it has to be a lot more powerful, or you need 2 more cards kind of like around the same power level of Tiny Knight of Evil to even hope to achieve a constructed worthy deck. So for that card, for that reason, this card is unplayable in constructed, wild, and standard. But in arena, it's actually very interesting. With Warlock in arena, you generally want to play this zoo-y curve out kind of deck, right? And this card actually helps you do that. For example, if you don't have that many 3s in your Warlock deck, you play this card on 2, and then you get more chances to get like a decent 3-drop the turn after. So you kind of have to look at your curve and see how this card fits into it. If you have it's basically good if you have not enough 3s, or if your deck doesn't curve out that well, it's pretty good. It's kind of weird in that way, because if your deck doesn't curve out that well, the more cards you get, the more likely you are to curve out. And in all other kind of decks, it's pretty like irrelevant, I would say. But yeah, it's a playable card in Arena. It's a playable card, and it's just interesting. So I thought I'd mention those 2 caveats about the card. But it's a definitely playable card. It's not really great, and it's not really bad. It's just like, for all intents and purposes, it's a Bloodfen Raptor, right? And in Warlock, you can always draw more cards. The fact that it discards a random card but then draws you a card means that you're not really down. Like, you're not really losing any card, essentially, as far as card advantage goes. So yeah, I think it's an okay card in Arena, but definitely not good enough in Constructed, just because it doesn't have a lot of enablers. Next card we have is the Darkspeaker. 5 mana, 3/6, swaps stats with a friendly minion, an epic minion. So this is a very interesting card. We've never actually had this sort of ability before in Hearthstone, and I tried analyzing it. So so I first thought, okay, so you want to play it with death rattles like Nerubian Egg, right? Because you can kind of look at the Darkspeaker as a 5 mana, 3/6 charge. That's kind of okay. It's not really anything special, but it's okay. So you can look at it that way, but it's not really a 5 mana, 3/6 charge, just because you lose the attack essentially on whatever you swap with. So the only times where it's a 5 mana, 3/6 charge is when you have something with 0 attack on the board. So I thought, hey, Nerubian Egg, pretty good, you know. But then the thing is, the Nerubian Egg doesn't die, and like, you really want Nerubian Egg to die. So I looked at what other death rattles there are in the game, and it turns out like this is not even that good with death rattles, just because the 6 health is not really. It's really hard to get rid of. It's kind of like the effect we had with Anomalus. It's very hard to kill if you want to play this with a death rattle themed deck. So it's only good in like 0/3 minions that actually don't do anything. So it's good with Shaman Totems, for example. But it's not even that good then, because 5 mana 3/6 charge is underwhelming, to say the least. I mean, it's good in a controlling kind of way, but you kind of have to. It's conditional because you have to have like the 0/2 on the board, so it's not really good in that control sense. So the only cards that this is very good with is Dragon Egg. So any cards that have an effect when you hit into it, like an effect that is actually not just like an enrage effect. Like maybe it's good with Angry Chicken even, right? So it's an interesting card. I just thought I'd talk about it a little bit, but for the most part, it's only good with cards that have this generation effect whenever you hit into them. So it's good with Dragon Egg, but why is your Dragon Egg up as still a 0/2 on the board on turn 5? Yeah, you kind of want to have gotten value out of it by then, either with the like Defender of Argus or something. But it's good with Dragon Egg, and it's also good with Acolyte of Pain. So those are the only 2 things off the top of my head that I think is good of, and again, the Angry Chicken sort of as well, but that's not really good enough. It's a very interesting card though, and it's definitely a card to look out for whenever cards like these are printed. Cards like Angry Chicken and Dragon Egg and Acolyte of Pain. But well, so far, like, not enough supporting cards exist for this to see play in Constructed. In Arena, it's kind of like an okay card. It's not even that okay, because it's basically a 5 mana 3/6 for the most part. You're not gonna get the charge off that often. It's only gonna be valuable if you have a minion that has less than 3 attack, because in that case you kind of get the upside of more attack, but that's not really that often in Arena. So in Arena, it's also a pretty bad card. Overall, across the board, this card is pretty bad, but it's a very interesting one, and definitely one to, keep in mind as expansions roll out. Okay, next card we have is Divine Strength, a 1-mana common paladin spell. Give me a +1/+2. So the card I compare this to is Shadowed Sun Cleric. So it's kind of like a Shadowed Sun Cleric, because Shadowed Sun is understated by 1 mana, sort of, kind of, a little bit more than 1 mana, but the 1 mana has charge, so it kind of evens out. But Shadowed Sun Cleric is also a minion that you can just play out. Divine Strength is not, but for that you get a +1 health on it, which is actually kind of nice. But the thing is, it's I don't think it's that good, just because it doesn't do enough as a card on its own. Like, the problem with this card is actually that you have to cut something else for it, and this card is like very, very mediocre. It's kind of like a 1-drop that has charge if you have the board, which in Paladin you tend to do, don't get me wrong, but that's kind of about to change with the new expansion, because a lot of the enablers for this, like Muster for Battle and Minibot, are gone. So, keeping all that in mind, it's not really great. It is great with something, again, like Dragon Egg. But, so maybe it's good in, like, Egg Paladin. I mean, who knows? But aside from, like, a Divine Favor deck that you can actually make the card back, because Divine Favor, contrary to popular belief, didn't actually not get nerfed. Aside from Divine Favor Paladin, this is not going to see that much play, I don't think. No, not going to see that much Divine Strength. It's okay in that kind of, like, super balls to the wall aggressive YOLO Paladin deck with, like, Abusive Sergeants and maybe Dragon Egg, and well, we'll see what else when the expansion actually hits and we try to build that sort of deck. Definitely an okay card in that deck. Anywhere else, though, this is unplayable. And in the Arena, it's pretty good, just because it does what Paladin wants to do in the Arena, which is get on the board early, so that, again, your buffs are active, because you have, like, a lot of cards that are very good, kind of like Keeper of Uldaman. You have your Blessing of Kings, your Seal of Champions diseases, but you kind of want to guarantee that board control first, and this kind of lets you do that for the most part. So it's pretty good in Arena. It's definitely an above average card, and I like that. I like it. Playable, I would say, in Arena and in some sort of Divine Favor Paladin, but in any other Paladin deck, you would not want to play this. Okay, so next card we have is the Doomcaller, 8 mana, 7/9 rare minion. Battlecry, give your Cthulhu +2/+2 wherever it is. If it's dead, shuffle it, that is Cthulhu, into your deck. Now, is that good? No, it's not good, for multiple reasons. First of all, it's an 8 mana, 7/9, doesn't do anything. I mean, it's not that it does nothing, don't get me wrong, but you can't play this in a Cthulhu conditional card on the same turn, because it's very expensive. It also doesn't have taunt, so rip if you're on low life. And on top of that, it, believe it or not, this goes against what Cthulhu decks want to do generally. Cthulhu decks are actually about, either getting to Cthulhu and winning off of Cthulhu for the most part, or just using all that they can out of their Cthulhu conditional cards, like Ancient Shield Bearer and the Priest one that gives you 10 life, and the Claxi Amber Weaver, and so forth and so forth. And this doesn't go well with either of those plans, actually, because if you played Cthulhu and it was killed, like, you're in a pretty bad spot. Like, I don't know how your Cthulhu was killed, but if it didn't kill their board or kill them, like, you're obviously pretty far behind. And if it was removed after that, and you're still not close to winning the game, then you obviously did something wrong. And you're pretty far behind, so then an 8 mana 7/9 wouldn't help you out. So for that reason, this guy is pretty bad, I believe. Just because of its slowness and just because it looks like it's there to help you get your Cthulhu back, but Cthulhu really just probably wouldn't work that way. Like, that's not the Cthulhu game plan, I believe. And in Arena, this card is, again, unplayable because Cthulhu cards will not be in the Arena. Next card that we have is a Duskboar. It's a 2 mana 4/1 beast. I mean, it's a 2 mana card with 1 health. It actually does not draw you a card, kind of like Loot Hoarder would do. Right? So it's actually losing you a card whenever this gets pinged down for any reason. So the fact that your opponent can actually remove it with their hero power for a 0 tempo loss is actually what makes this card very bad. So it's unplayable in Constructed, Wild, or Standard, but in the Arena, it's still not good. But it's okay, kind of like how 1 health cheap minions in Arena are okay. For example, you play something like an Ironbeak Howl, like that's probably a bad example. But let's say you have like, you make a trade and you have like a 3/1 minion that's left on the board, and then you play Abusive Sergeant on something else, or on that very same minion. Now you have 2 1 health minions on the board, and your opponent can't ping both of them with their hero power. So in that case, it's pretty good. But even then, it's like not that good, just because they would ping the higher attack minion. So you're still kind of losing out, unless the other minion is also exactly a 4/1. In which case, good for you. You played a 2 mana 4/1. But it's still not great, even then. So yeah, pretty bad card across the board. Sometimes you can make it work in Arena if you can set things up properly, but other than that, don't put this in your deck. Next card we have is the Eldritch Horror. It's an 8 mana 6/10, just vanilla minion. Yeah, it's just a vanilla minion that costs 8 mana. At 8 mana, like the thing you play at 8 mana better do something immediately. Like, it better have Taunt, or it better have Charge, or it better have like a Rag effect, or you get my point. 8 mana 6/10, like, although the stat distribution is pretty good, yeah, not that great of a card. It just doesn't do enough. It just it takes up your whole turn. You can only hero power with it. That's on turn 10. So yeah, pretty bad in Constructed. Very weak to any kind of hard removal. But yeah, you don't need me to say anymore. In Arena, it's okay. It's a below average card, for sure. Or at best, it's like an average card. But it's by no means very good. Just because, again, it's like, it's very inflexible, is what it is, at 8 mana. Next card we have is the Eternal Sentinel, and finally we have a very, very, very good card. It's a 2 mana 3/2 that unlocks your overloaded mana crystals. So there's actually a card that already does that, and that's Lava Shock. But you're getting 1 more of those cards, so it's actually a lot more consistent to actually, remove your Overlord. So these 2 cards existing in tandem actually make everything with Overload a lot better. Just because now you can, play Elemental Destruction and Eternal Sentinel on 5. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, it's pretty good. overall. It's just that the redundancy factor that you are getting from having it's just basically a lot more consistent if you want to have overload removal. And the fact that it's a minion is actually very good with things like elemental destruction, because with things like elemental destruction, like you play elemental destruction and then they have nothing on the board, and then what do? You lava shock their face? Like, probably not, just because, but you still kind of have to, because the turn after you would be super overloaded. You wouldn't be able to cast lava shock. But now you can play Eternal Sentinel, and that's very good. Yeah, not much more to say about this card. We'll see play across the board in all formats. Even in the arena, this is very good. It's a 3/2 for 2 that if you happen to get some overload spells, is actually very nice. So yeah, it's a very good card. I don't know why this is an epic. I guess Blizzard thinks that the mechanic is too complicated. Lava Shock is a rare, but it's exactly the same mechanic. So I don't know about that. I don't know about the rarity, but I mean, maybe they want you to fork out a little bit more dust. Who knows? Anyway, the card is very, very good. I expect it to see play across the board. Next card, not so much. 1 mana, rare shaman spell, evolve. Transform your minions into random minions that cost 1 more. So it's a win more card. And Hearthstone is a win more game, so you would think, oh, it's very good. But you kind of want to have a backup plan for when you're not winning more. And Shaman already has like a lot of win more cards. Their totems are actually win more cards, just because when you get like the 4 totems on the board, you have the spell power, so you can actually deal with a lot more things. You get your healing totem, so you can make efficient trades, and your opponent still can't ping your stuff, even though if you leave it at 1 life. You have, your guaranteed taunt, so your opponent can never really actually trade efficiently. So Shaman is generally like a win more class, like one of the most win more classes. They also have things like Flame Tongue Totem, and now you have Evolve. Don't get me wrong, Evolve is not a bad card, but the thing is, when you put like a minion that costs, let's say, 2 mana. For simplicity's sake, you put a minion that costs 2 mana into your deck. If you play Evolve on it, the minion you're gonna get on average is around kind of like half a mana better. Right? It's not really 1 mana better, just because it's out of the random card pool. So it's kind of like half a mana better. So to get like any benefit, you would either have to play Evolve on 3 minions, at which point, how the heck do you, like, you have 3 minions on the board, you are already winning, or you have to play it on 2 minions, but you have to have, gotten some value out of them already to be like really, get the full value out of this card. So it's very inconsistent in that sense, that you need like a lot of board control to make it work. So you need either 3 minions or 2 damage minions to get the full value out of Evolve. Now, notably, this card works very well with battle cries. So Tarkar Totemic is very good. The basically understated battle cry minions. So Windspeaker, for all intents and purposes, is pretty good with Evolve. It's not a good card, but it's good with Evolve. Also with things like Defender of Argus, it's very good. With things like Gnomish Inventor, again, it's very good. But the thing is, again, you need like 2 minions at least to get full value out of this. And if you only want to hit 1 minion, then you would not play Evolve. You would play Master of Evolution, the 4 mana 4/5 that actually has the Evolve effect stapled onto it. So just the fact that you have that guy to handle those fringe cases where you have like a damaged minion or like a Defender of Argus on the board, that's already good enough. You don't need to put Evolve into your deck. At most, this is a 1 of. but I don't think even that much. And that's like in standard. In wild, you don't have time to play evolve. In wild, if you have like 3 minions, you're pretty good on the board for the most part. So I don't think this is going to be too good of a card, just because Master of Evolution does the same thing and better because it's less situational. And when you do get Master of Evolution to hit, you rarely get the opportunity to hit more than 1 minion with that effect. So that's why Evolve is not that great. And in Arena, it's a card that does absolutely nothing when you're behind on board. Keep in mind that when you evolve something, you cannot attack with it immediately. So you can't just, evolve at the start of your turn and make trades. That would be insane. So it doesn't really help you out if you're like behind on board. Like even if you're like slightly behind on the board and you're like, oh, I'll just buff my things, you can't do that. So even in Arena, it's not that great. And okay, the next card we have is the Evolved Kobold. 4 mana 2/2 spell damage +2. We talked about spell damage earlier, how the actually good spell damage cards actually don't require you to pay any stats for them, to like sacrifice a lot for them. Kind of like Blood Mage Thalnos doesn't do that. Kind of like how Azure Drake doesn't do that. Kind of like how the new Mage called Sorcerer doesn't do that. So here you're overpaying by a lot, and it's you're overpaying by a lot just because 2 spell damage is a lot. It scales very well with AoE. If you have this with something like an Arcane Explosion, it's very, very strong. So that's why it's overcosted, but the fact that it's overcosted by so much makes the card in and of itself unplayable. So this won't see. I don't expect this to see any play in Constructed Hearthstone. In Arena, you're gonna have this guy sometimes. I mean, I don't know what your other draft options are to have to pick this guy, but in Arena it's still pretty bad. So bad across the board. And the final card we have is the Faceless Behemoth. 10 mana, 10/10 common minion, vanilla minion. He doesn't do anything. He's just a 10 mana, 10/10. And you guys remember what we said about Eldritch Horror, right? It's an 8 mana, 6/10. Yeah, big dude that requires a lot of mana to play on the board. Yeah, this is a bigger dude that has more attack. But generally, the thing is, the above 6 attack rarely matters. Like 1 out of, what is it, like in Arena specifically, 7 games, because this is obviously not a good card in Constructed. Like 1 out of like 6 games or something, the more attack is going to matter whenever you plop this guy down. And yeah, it's not even good in Arena. It's just, it's not like unplayable, not like totally unplayable, but overall it's pretty bad just because you need 10 mana to put this on the board. Like it's okay, but it's significantly below average. Like there's better things. Like the clunkiness is what kills this card. And yeah, so we got through it. That's all the cards, guys. We made good time, 5 minutes less than last time, so that's pretty good. Making progress. Progress is always good. So that's it for the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it through the whole video, congratulations, man or girl. It really was long, so if you made it through, thank you so much for watching. And yeah, let me know what you guys think about the review as a whole, about the what do you think about the cards, what do you think about the expansion, what are your favorite cards. I want to hear about like all about it. So let me know in the comments. I will be reading all of them as always. And yeah, that's it for the video, guys. Thanks you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.